Hello, and welcome to Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. Before we begin, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and you can always join my Patreon. We have a big goal there, and I will talk about that at the end of the video. I thought for a while about titling this episode, Don't Talk to Cops. It sounds harsh, but it has nothing to do with disliking cops. I often sing the praises of police officers here. We need them, and like I've said a million times before and will continue to say, I truly believe that most police officers become cops for the right reasons, and I truly believe that most of them are good. The small percentage of bad cops give the rest of them a really terrible name, but I choose to believe that most of them are decent and honorable. That said, this case is going to have you questioning the competency of police, and it's going to have you questioning their training. Also, it is just common sense that if you are ever in serious trouble or if you are ever being questioned regarding a serious crime, do not talk to the police. If you have information to give and you are innocent, get a lawyer, and then the lawyer can help guide you through the process of talking to the cops. Now, I've just finished saying I think cops are mainly good guys, so why shouldn't you talk to them? Well, for starters, you might be unlucky enough to get a bad guy interviewing you. But second, even good cops are capable of tunnel vision. Even good cops are capable of fixating on a suspect, and even good cops make mistakes. And then there is a cop like the one in today's story. You'll have to judge for yourself which category he falls into. This case has stuck with me from the very first moment I heard about it. Like the Jean Benet case and so many others, I waffled back and forth as the crime was reported on who I thought committed this horrific crime. Surely it has to be the obvious suspect, right? Well, that's definitely what the police thought. But what if it isn't? What happens when it's not the obvious suspect? And what happens when police, and then the media, and then the public get tunnel vision? What happens when you have a cop that screws up so bad, there's no going back? You're going to find out today as we discuss the very disturbing and gruesome story of the murder of Nona Dirksmeyer and the beauty queen killer. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's get into it. December 15th, 2005. It's a chilly winter day in the small town of Russellville, Arkansas. Russellville is home to Arkansas Tech University, and each year around 10,000 college students enroll and attend, adding to the population of about 30,000 people. There's a quaint little downtown area where art galleries and boutiques dot the streets, and it's still one of those places where most people either know each other or at least recognize each other around town. In December of 2005, people were getting ready for Christmas, and as the holidays approached, there were Christmas parties being held every night of the week. But there were people in Russellville who were not celebrating. In fact, this young man, Kevin Jones, was quite worried. Kevin had been trying to reach his girlfriend all day, and she wasn't picking up the phone. Kevin was the longtime boyfriend of this woman, Nona Dirksmeyer. Nona was a 19-year-old music major at Arkansas Tech University, and she was also the reigning Miss Petite Jean Valley. She'd also competed in the Miss Arkansas pageant. Kevin and Nona had been dating on and off for years. Their relationship was not without its troubles, but lately people thought things had been going more smoothly. On the evening of December 15th, 2005, Kevin got dressed up to go with his mother Janice to a Christmas party in nearby Dover. On their way to the party, Kevin got really quiet, and his mother could tell something was bothering her son. Kevin then told his mother that he couldn't get a hold of Nona, and he was concerned. Janice told her son that she was sure everything was okay. Nona was probably just busy studying or practicing singing, which was something she often did. Nona also had an appointment with this little girl that she had been mentoring through the Big Brother, Big Sister program, and Janice just figured that the day had gotten away from Nona. She tried reassuring her son, saying there's nothing to worry about, but it didn't seem to help. Kevin decided to call Nona's mother to ask her if she knew where Nona was. Nona's mother did not pick up her cell phone, so Kevin then tried Nona's stepfather. He picked up, but said no, he actually hadn't seen or talked to Nona all day. Finally, Kevin called a buddy of his, Ryan Whitesides, who was at his job delivering pizzas. Kevin asked if Ryan would go by Nona's apartment and check on her while he was out on a delivery run, and Ryan said sure, he'd do it. Just as Kevin and his mother were pulling out of Russellville to head towards Dover, Ryan called Kevin back and said that he was standing outside Nona's apartment. Ryan said something was strange. There was a light on in the house, and Nona's silver Mustang was in the driveway, but she wasn't answering the door. Kevin said to Ryan, "I'll be right there." He then explained what was happening to his mother, Janice, and told her that he couldn't go to the party until he checked on Nona. So Janice turned the car around and they headed to Nona's house. When they got there, Kevin realized he didn't have his keys to Nona's house, and the front door was locked. But he saw the light on inside and decided to go try the sliding glass door. He knew that Nona always kept a wooden stick in the rail of the slider to keep it from being open from the outside, but he had to try. Kevin and Ryan walked around to the back of Nona's house, and they were surprised and then disturbed to find that the stick was not where it usually was, and the sliding glass door was unlocked. As Kevin went to grab the handle of the slider, he moved the vertical blinds out of the way. Just then, Ryan grabbed his hand and said, "Dude, don't you see her? She's right there." Kevin looked into the living room, and there was Nona, laying naked except for white socks on her living room floor. Kevin pushed past his friend and ran to Nona. In the dark, he turned his girlfriend over, and when he did, he could feel that the carpet underneath her was wet. Then he smelled the blood. Instinctually, Kevin picked Nona up to take her to the car, but then he realized he shouldn't be touching her at all. He laid her back down as Ryan went to get Janice, who he let in through the front door. Janice enters and sees what's happening. She begins to cry and she calls 911. On that call, she is crying and she is panicking, and she tells the operator what they found. As she's talking to the operator, she's also telling the boys, "Don't touch anything." Kevin tried to start CPR on Nona, but her teeth were clenched shut, and he couldn't force any air into her mouth. So he straddled her and held her body up against his body, trying to comfort her, but there was nothing that he could do. Nona Dirksmeyer had been dead for hours. The police arrived at the crime scene. There they found Nona dead on the floor, and Kevin, her boyfriend, covered in her blood. He had moved the body, he had touched the body, and his instincts to try and help his girlfriend would later become a very big problem for Kevin. As the crime scene techs arrived and Nona was photographed, Kevin was taken into police custody. Here is a clip of his first interview. He's still wearing the cream-colored slacks and black turtleneck his mother purchased for him to wear to the Christmas party that night.
That's when I sent a text message to Ryan when I was leaving the house. I asked him to go over there, and then he called me when I was in Russellville, and he said that she wasn't answering her door or anything, so I took a turn off of Main Street and by whatever the First National Bank is, whatever that road is, and we headed out that way, and we turned and went to her apartment, and she wasn't answering her door.
Who's we?
Me and my mom. And Ryan was already there standing at the door waiting. He tried to
He's the pizza guy, right?
Yeah. He tried to open the door up. And it wouldn't, he tried just to open it, and it was locked, so he dinged the doorbell a few times and it didn't work.
What's Ryan's last name?
Whiteside.
Whiteside.
He was there whenever they came.
Okay.
And then after there, so I opened the door, the sliding door on the back. She always kept it locked with a stick in it. Or maybe he didn't even have a lock, and she just always kept a stick in it, I can't remember. But she always kept something in there where nobody could get in. And then I saw her laying there, and I got on top of her and started praying. And then they called 911.
How did you get in the house?
It was unlocked. That back sliding door, I don't know if it kind of had a little bit of, at first I pulled it, it didn't move, and I yanked it, and it opened up.
Okay.
And then I just got in.
Tell me what you saw when you first entered.
I saw her laying there with blood all underneath her head. Just laying there with her arms like this.
Word spread throughout the community of Russellville that Nona Dirksmeyer was dead, murdered in her apartment right there in town. People were shocked. Just 6 months earlier, Nona had stood on the pageant stage and competed for the title of Miss Arkansas, and now she was gone. Nona's friends gathered together to remember Nona. They talked to the media about who she was, how she had overcome serious childhood abuse by her own father to become a confident and beautiful young woman. And they talked about how much Nona loved to sing. Nona went through a period of time where she had really struggled, and she began cutting herself, and she had nightmares. And her mother found out what she was going through and sent her to counseling, and they put her on medication. And she seemed to get better once she discovered her love of music and her love of the world of pageants. She dove into the pageant scene headfirst, and she made her service platform something she truly cared about and wanted to help with, and that was victims of child abuse. Kevin and Nona had known each other since kindergarten, and Kevin was aware of Nona's tough past. And then they started dating in high school. Kind of out of the blue, about their sophomore year, Nona was suddenly dumped by Kevin. He kind of fell for this other girl and thought he was interested in this other girl. So he starts dating this other girl, and Nona was completely devastated. She sunk into a really deep depression. She started skipping school and staying in bed. She didn't want to see Kevin holding hands with this new girl in the hall. She had a really hard time with it all. After only about 3 weeks, Kevin realized that he'd made a mistake, and he asked Nona to take him back, which she did. Nona's mother, however, she was looking at Kevin through a new lens, and I don't blame her. He had deeply hurt her daughter, and Carol Dirksmeyer was not going to forget what Kevin had done. Kevin and Nona then talked about getting married when they got out of college, but now all of their dreams were gone, along with Nona's life, taken. But by who? Back at the crime scene, police were examining an overturned lamp with a heavy base. They thought this might be the murder weapon. Nona had a massive skull fracture in the back of her head. There was also blood smeared on the light bulb of the lamp. The apartment was messy. Nona was a busy college girl, and she never cleaned up after herself. There was laundry everywhere, along with dirty dishes and sheet music Nona was studying. And so the cops kind of had to wade their way through the mess. My family gives me a really hard time because whenever I leave my house or whenever I go on a road trip, I'm going to be gone for a few days, my house has to be spotless. And it's because if I get murdered, I don't want the police footage that will be shown. This is so crazy. To show a messy house. You can take the happy little hostess mentality out of Mormonism, but even out of Mormonism, the happy little hostess mentality somehow finds a way to stay. Yeah, I know, I get it. I know who I am, believe me. In the piles of clothes and things at the crime scene, they found Nona's jeans that were inside out as if someone had ripped them off of her really quickly, and her underwear was rolled up inside the jeans. So obviously this was done during the attack. There was also blood smeared on the vertical blinds near the sliding glass door. Items had been knocked off the kitchen countertops, and there was blood on the oven door. So they knew there had been a pretty good struggle. But there were two things that really stood out to the police. The first was that someone had taken the back off of Nona's flip phone. Remember, you used to be able to open them up and slip the battery out the back. Some of them you had to take a piece of the back off to get the battery out. And the battery was missing. What had her killer been trying to hide by taking part of her phone? And then the second thing, there was a used condom wrapper, torn and open and sitting near Nona's body. So those were two very big pieces of evidence. Nona's body was transported by the coroner, and the crime scene was locked up. The coroner would later find that Nona had been murdered between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. that day, and she had been brutalized, beaten, stabbed, punched, and assaulted. Back at police headquarters, Kevin was still telling police his story. They took photos of Kevin and noticed he had a cut on his forehead. For hours, they spoke to Kevin. They asked him all about he and Nona's relationship, and they asked him where he had been all that day. Kevin told them he'd run a bunch of errands and he'd been on the computer. He said lots of people had seen him running around town. The police asked when he last spoke to Nona. Kevin said it had been about 9 o'clock that morning. Nona had texted him, "Good morning," but he didn't pick up because he was asleep. He didn't return her text message. Then later on, he tried to text Nona, tried to call her. She never picked up. He never heard from her. The cops listened intently to what Kevin had to say. And then about midnight, they released Kevin and his mother. He thought he was leaving the police station for the last time. And it turns out it was just the first. December 17th, 2005. The investigation was now in full swing. Police were able to get Nona's phone unlocked, and what they found was interesting. Nona was talking with other young men other than Kevin. One of the messages in her text files showed a man accusing Nona of leading him on. The police spoke with all of the young men in Nona's life, and one by one, they eliminated them. When all was said and done, they had only one suspect, in their eyes, Nona's boyfriend, Kevin Jones. On the day of Nona's final viewing at the funeral home, police called Kevin in for another interview. He told them that he had to be at the viewing at 4 o'clock, and they assured him it wouldn't take long. Well, the viewing started. Kevin was not there. The viewing ended, and Kevin was not there. Everyone was wondering where Kevin was, and then his parents found out that he had gone to the police station, and that made them very angry. What they didn't know till then is that Kevin had been sitting in an interrogation room being accused and yelled at for hours by the police. Kevin's parents, Janice and Hiram Jones, drove to the police station, and on their way, they spoke with their attorney, who told them, "Get Kevin out of that interview room. He must not know he can leave." So Janice and Hiram marched into the police station, which was closed for the day, and demanded to see their son. And the officer that came to the desk refused to let them talk to Kevin. So Hiram Jones walked down the hall to the light that he could see was on, knowing that his son was in that interview room. And he banged on the door. He banged and banged and banged, and they would not open the door. So we're already in very shady police tactic territory here. The police should have opened the door. The police should have let Kevin talk to his parents. The fact that Kevin didn't know his rights as a 19-year-old doesn't mean he's not entitled to his rights. And it's the police job to preserve our rights. That is part of their job. It is not the police's job to violate our rights. It is the police's job to make sure our rights are preserved. They are held to that standard in a court of law, and the police here did not do that. When the police wouldn't let Hiram speak to his son Kevin, Hiram picked up a chair and threw it against the wall, breaking the sheetrock. So the police arrested Hiram for vandalism and disorderly conduct, leaving Janice to try and get her son out of that interview room. What neither Janice or Hiram knew is that the police already had Kevin wired up to a polygraph machine. The police had convinced Kevin that the polygraph was the only way to prove his innocence. And as his parents fought to get at him, Kevin was being told that he had not only failed the polygraph, but he had especially failed it worse than they'd ever seen in 20 years. Those are the exact words that they used. Now, if you've been here for even 5 minutes, I do not need to reiterate. No one should ever take a polygraph test. It is junk science. It is not reliable science. Never, ever take a polygraph test or a voice stress analysis test. Until we have a test that is actually conclusive, like DNA, don't take these pseudoscience tests. You are just asking for trouble. I know of, 50 cases where guilty people have passed polygraph tests, and I know of thousands of cases where innocent people have failed polygraph tests. They don't work. Kevin could not believe the police were blaming him and saying he had failed a polygraph test. Well, the thing of it is, he didn't fail the polygraph. They were just lying to him. The lead investigator, Officer Frost, told Kevin, "I'm good at my job and I know what happened here. You killed Nona." After the polygraph test, the police were kind of tag teaming Kevin. One would come in, talk to him, leave the room. Another one would come in, talk to him, leave the room. And this had been going on for like 4.5 hours, 5 hours, without an advisor, without an attorney. And remember, this kid is 19 years old at the time. Legally, he's an adult. Emotionally, probably not. I had a 19-year-old son at one point, and there is no way in hell I would let him talk to the police on his own. Then the police dropped a bomb on Kevin. They claim that the blood smears found on the light bulb of the lamp in Nona's house, the murder weapon that I mentioned earlier, had Kevin's palm print in the blood. And Kevin said, That's impossible. I didn't touch that lamp. They also told Kevin his prints were on the base of the lamp. And they shouted at Kevin, how did it feel to kill her? And he sat there for hours, just completely bewildered. It would later come out that Kevin's prints were on some of the things in the house, but that's because he moved things around to get to Nona. He'd also been in the house a bunch of times. Kevin began to cry and he begged them to stop, but they didn't. They told Kevin that Nona had been talking to other young men, and what they believed happened was this. Kevin was with Nona when a text came in from another man, and Kevin flew into a rage and killed Nona. That's what they said they believed happened. Kevin said that is not what happened. He didn't do it. He didn't know Nona was talking to any other guys. Finally, Janice's attorney spoke with the police and forced them to release him. Kevin was a shell of himself. He'd been put through the ringer, but this was just the beginning of his nightmare. Over the coming days, the people in the entire area became convinced that Kevin Jones had killed Nona Dirksmeyer. Kevin's family was shunned at Nona's funeral. He didn't sit with her family. The local paper printed articles insinuating that Kevin was guilty, and it just got worse as time wore on. Then one day, Nona's mother called Kevin's mother and told her, I don't want Kevin to ever call here again. It was official. Nona's family had turned against Kevin. Kevin's family hired an attorney on Christmas Eve. They mortgaged their homes and took out loans, preparing for Kevin's arrest. They were going to fight for their son, and they knew it was going to be expensive. A few months went by, but then on March 31st, 2006, Kevin was arrested. Prosecutors went on the news saying that Kevin had tampered with the crime scene and had intentionally placed his hands and body in Nona's blood to have an excuse as to why his DNA would be with hers. The entire town turned against Kevin, and people started putting these Justice for Nona stickers on their cars and their businesses. They wanted Kevin to go down for this murder. Then Nona's parents held a press conference. Nona's mother had recently married a man named Dwayne Diapert. In fact, Dwayne was the reason Nona was living in an apartment when she was killed. Nona didn't like Dwayne, and she didn't want to live with him. Dwayne is a little bit different. He makes some pretty outlandish statements, and he's got very big opinions and big claims about this case, about Nona and about Kevin. Kevin's family assembles a legal team of 2 lawyers and a private investigator who is also a preacher, and together they get to work on Kevin's defense. Kevin's family and his defense team is convinced of his innocence, and they are going to fight for his freedom, and they are going to fight for his life. Kevin's attorneys found out that the condom wrapper found at the crime scene has never been tested for DNA. Can you believe that? The police responded. This is, when I was writing this, I was just sitting there with like my jaw hanging open. The police tell Kevin's defense attorneys that you can't test an item for fingerprints and DNA at the same time. You better alert the entire forensics community and the entire true crime community, because we all know that's bullshit. The cops in this case are so incompetent, it is unbelievable. So the attorney tells the cops, that is not true, and I will provide you whatever evidence, whatever written statements you need to convince you that is not true. I mean, we are lay people, and we know that you can test for fingerprints and DNA on the same item. It is done all the time. So the defense attorneys obtained the condom wrapper, this is just unreal to me, and sent it in for testing. In December of 2007, the results came back. There was male DNA on the condom wrapper, and that DNA did not belong to Kevin Jones. So at this point in time, Kevin's attorneys, his family, Kevin himself, they breathed a sigh of relief, thinking this would be it. That would be enough to get Kevin off the hook, right? They could not have been more wrong. The prosecution sees the DNA evidence and changes its theory. They now come to the position that Kevin came over to Nona's house and saw the condom wrapper there, and knowing she had had sex with another man, went ballistic and killed Nona. I mean, wow. Wow. You talk about tunnel vision. You talk about fixation. This is just such bad police work, and shame on the prosecutor too. Any investigator should be led by science in an investigation. I believe that. But you can't take one theory and then turn it to another theory and then take it to another theory to fit the facts and to fit the science, you've got to look at other people when there's other DNA involved, and they did not. They were just throwing theories at the wall to see what sticks, and that is not good police work. That is not science-backed investigation, and it's really quite appalling, but it gets so much worse. Kevin's attorneys find out that in the weeks after Nona's murder, her stepdad, Dwayne Dipert, decides he needs a cell phone. Dwayne is very frugal, and so he thinks to himself, how can I get myself a new cell phone for no cost? Oh, I know. I'll go get Nona's cell phone out of police evidence. You guys. Dwayne goes to Officer Frost and asks for Nona's cell phone, and Frost gives it to Dwayne. The trial hasn't even started. Nobody's been arrested. The phone hasn't been checked by a forensics team, hasn't been put through any sort of computer science or cell phone science. And this idiot cop gives this important piece of evidence to the victim's stepfather that she doesn't like, and he takes it and erases the cell phone. Totally erases all the data on it. There go all Nona's text messages, her contacts lists, and potentially the name of the killer, someone she most likely would have known, statistically. It is unreal. When I first heard this, even a layperson knows evidence must be properly stored and kept. How does a police officer not know this? Or did he know it and not care? Or did he know it and do it intentionally to try and throw the odds against Kevin? In any of those scenarios, it is very disturbing that one man with so many accesses to power, through evidence, through witnesses, through interviews, at any point in time, he's got all of this information at his hands, and he can so flagrantly violate the rules of procedure that he is giving evidence away. I feel like I just said a word salad there. I'm so flustered I can't even talk. Like, what the hell was he thinking? At this point in time, things are looking really bad for Kevin Jones. First off, he's the boyfriend, the person statistically most likely to kill Nona. Second, he's covered in her blood, and his fingerprints are all over the house. Nona's got other boyfriends Kevin doesn't know about. Kevin doesn't have a solid alibi for that time of day. And now a major piece of evidence has been taken out of play. Is Kevin Jones about to go down for a crime he didn't commit, or is he as guilty as sin? July 2007. The trial of Kevin Jones begins. The prosecution claimed that in between running errands on December 15th, 2005, Kevin went over to Nona's and after arguing, killed her. They went over the forensic evidence, and then it was the defense's turn. The defense told the jury this investigation was flawed at its very core. The attorney said the cops had tunnel vision from day one and that the forensics evidence was null and void because it had been so improperly handled. The defense brings some evidence to the jury that is almost too unbelievable to be true. The defense attorneys have discovered that at the crime scene, the cops took no fingerprints from the kitchen, no fingerprints in the bathroom, the bedroom, or even the thermostat that had been turned way down to 65 degrees. Didn't fingerprint the kitchen, even though there was blood on the stove, broken dishes, obviously there'd been a struggle there. They don't need fingerprints from that. What? They knew the thermostat had been turned way, way down, probably to throw off the time of death. They didn't take any fingerprints from the thermostat. Didn't bother to test the condom wrapper for DNA. What the hell did they do exactly? Then it comes out that Detective Frost had spoken with some of the men in Nona's contact list and in her text messaging groups, but had never bothered to take DNA from any of them. Just when you think it can't get worse, it gets worse. Then the jury hears about Frost giving Dwayne Dipert Nona's cell phone, and that was it. When the jury was sent to deliberate, they took a vote. 6 not guilty, 4 undecided, and 2 for guilty, but one woman later admitted that she voted guilty on purpose so she would have more sway with people that thought Kevin was guilty. I don't know, crafty, I guess, but really at this point there was only one person that thought he was guilty. They deliberated for days. The members reenacted the crime scene. They took their job very seriously, and when it was time, they announced their verdict. Kevin Jones was not guilty in the murder of Nona Dirksmeyer. The prosecution had not proved its case, and some of the jurors genuinely felt, even beyond the prosecution's weak case, Kevin hadn't done it. Kevin wept with relief, and so did his family. Nona's family was outraged, and the public was shocked. But like the jury foreperson said, the public hadn't heard the case. The very first thing Kevin and his attorneys did after Kevin was released, went to the press and told them they wanted police to start working to find Nona's real killer. The police said that wasn't going to happen, as they were convinced Kevin was the real killer, and they had no other suspect. Months went by, and then Kevin Jones' attorneys contacted the private investigator/preacher on their team and told him, "We have got to find out who killed Nona. We've got to do it for Kevin, and we've got to do it for Nona." The PI said, "I'm not really sure where to begin." And, he said, "I'll try to do whatever I can. I hope I can help." So 2 months later, this investigator got a call. It was a cop in Dover telling him that they had a burglary case with some interesting information. A man named Gary Dunn was on the hook, and that was a name Kevin's defense team had heard before. Gary Dunn was a known sex offender. He'd done prison time for attacking a female jogger years earlier, I believe 2002. He also lived right across the street from Nona Dirksmeyer. The PI looked into the police interview records. Officer Frost claims that he spoke with Gary Dunn, but that he had an alibi. He had been out shopping with his mother. Frost just took Gary Dunn at his word, this sex offender at his word, never questioned him again, didn't look into whether or not he was actually with his mother or actually shopping. Anyway. Kevin's defense team then set out to get a DNA sample from Gary Dunn. Dunn was brought to the interview room on the robbery charge, and the preacher private investigator asked him for his DNA. Gary Dunn gave it to him. The sample was sent off for testing in September of 2007. So a month goes by, and the PI never hears anything back. So he calls the police and the laboratory, and he says, "Why haven't I got results?" And they said, "Well, the state's not going to pay for this. We called Kevin's mom and told her she had to pay for this." You guys, it is the state's job to pay for this testing on a case like this. The test is like $700, but money was tight for Kevin's family. They'd already spent everything they had and mortgaged their homes for his defense. So the private investigator calls Kevin's mom and she's like, "They're not going to test this unless you pay for it." And she was like, "I guess I'll pay for it then." Can you believe this? Can you believe this? So the Joneses pay for the test and it gets sent off. When the results come back, the DNA taken from Gary Duff was a perfect match to the DNA found on the condom wrapper in Nona's apartment. They had him. And when I say perfect match, whenever you hear perfect match, it's always like 99.9. There's never like 100% match. It was as close to perfect as you can get. So cops bring Gary Dunn in for an interview. He was then informed his DNA matched that at the crime scene, and Gary was arrested. As if this case was not already disturbing, frustrating enough, my friends, Gary Dunn's first trial results in a hung jury. How? We would need another episode for that. So he's put on trial again, and for a second time, the jury is hung. I need to lay down. At this point in time, I am so frustrated. So the prosecution just gives up. The attorneys told the media that so much damage had been done in the investigation. The officers who worked the case had botched it so badly, they had no hope of ever getting a verdict in a trial against Gary. Now, I don't know if I believe that they could never get a verdict, but I do believe that this investigation is one of the worst I've ever heard of. I mean, the first red flag was a cop claiming that you can't test an item for prints. They won't let Kevin out of the interview room when he hasn't been arrested. They don't test for DNA. They don't talk to the other guys that Nona's talking with. I mean, it was horrible. So Gary Dunn is free to go. He is released to the dismay of everyone, including Nona's family, who by this time has been convinced that Gary is the killer and not Kevin. And that was that. A known monster was on the loose, a man who had already attacked one woman in 2002, and then who, according to law enforcement, brutally murdered Nona Dirksmeyer. Gary Dunn was a free man, and then a call came in to 911. December 2018. This woman, Riley Wagner, is in her car heading home before final exams at college. She pulls into the parking lot at her dorm and noticed someone was following her. Riley Wagner is also a pageant participant. She is currently Miss Arkansas. She was also well aware of the Nona Dirksmeyer story. Riley looked in her rearview mirror and noticed the man in the car behind her, this gray sedan to be exact, was almost hitting her bumper. As she pulled into a parking space, the man pulled in behind her and blocked her in. So anyway, I started shooting. The man got out of his car and walked up to Riley's driver door and tried opening it, but Riley had the car locked. She then grabbed her cell phone and the man watched through the window as she dialed 911. He got back in his car and drove away. Police arrived at Riley's dorm to take her report, but as they stood there talking to her, a second call came into dispatch. A woman in Russellville was on the line claiming a man had just tried to force her into his vehicle. This woman was able to break free and run. Who was the man who attempted to kidnap both women? Gary Dunn. Both women knew of Gary Dunn from the news. They recognized him. They later picked him out of a lineup. The police caught up to Gary and pulled him over. Inside his car were ropes and knives. There was no question Gary was out to kill someone that night. And these two women are very, very fortunate that they were smart and alert and they survived. I actually think Gary knew the cops were coming for him after the Riley incident, and he tried to hurry and get to another woman so he could do his thing and have that before he got arrested. I really believe that. Oh, I feel frazzled. I'm just so wound up about this. This stuff makes me so mad. Gary Dunn was arrested and went to trial. He was convicted of kidnapping and sent to prison. He got 15 years, but is only required to serve 1/3 of that term. He will be eligible for parole next year. How does this keep happening, you guys? How does this guy keep getting out of jail? Now, he might not get parole, but he is going to get out of prison at some point. And when he does, the women in whatever area he chooses to live in better be on the lookout, because this guy is a monster. Kevin went on to file a civil lawsuit against the police department that had focused solely on him. Unfortunately for Kevin, he filed too late and the case was dismissed because of the statute of limitations. Kevin Jones did not let that stop him. He went to law school. He graduated, he passed the bar, and he is now a criminal defense attorney. He spends his time defending the accused. He is married, he has a family, and he lives in his hometown of Russellville. Of all the things I don't know, and there are many, many of those, there is one thing I am sure of. Many people in this country are wrongly accused each year and every year for crimes they did not commit. Most of the time, our justice system does its job, and most of the time, those people are set free. But here's something else I know. Most of the time is not good enough. Not when you're talking about someone's freedom and their entire life. Our system is far from perfect, but we could do a lot to improve it by simply demanding more transparency and more accountability from the people we allow so much power. In the end, we must know that those who hold the keys to our freedom are held to the highest standard of responsibility possible. Until then, the bad news is, my friends, some of us are living on borrowed time. Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. Hit the like button if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you want, you can join our Patreon. For a few bucks a month, you help support me and keep the videos coming. My patrons are the best. Honestly, I don't know what I'd be without them. I wouldn't be here. But on Patreon, we have a big goal. We are going to start raising money for police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that's not been tested. There are thousands of sexual assault kits in refrigeration around the country. We want to pick a case, donate the money to get the kit tested, and maybe solve the case. On top of that, we get the perpetrator's DNA in the system in case they're associated with other crimes. Then other departments can hit on the DNA that we paid for to get tested. I know it's a big goal, it's a lofty goal, but we are going to make it happen. Thank you so much for your support, for spending a little bit of your day with me. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.